Welcome. I'm your host, Christina Haskin, and tonight I'm privileged to have people from the Ferguson Library, and we're going to talk about the library and the situation of the importance of libraries today. We have the President and Chief Executive Officer, Ernest DiMattia, and the Chair of the Ferguson Board, Kathryn Emmet. Outside of the regular federal funding things that, with the emphasis on trying to get our country more educated and to bring that up, I mean, a library is part of the education process. And is there a national movement or something about this with libraries as far as getting a little more attention in that way?
Not
what I was going to say, I think there's certainly, in Connecticut, there is a library association that is very active, and library, you know, that is very conscious of supporting and working together to support libraries across the state. I think in general, and Ernie, definitely correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think in general, libraries like schools, elementary schools, tend to be locally supported.
That's exactly right.
And so there are local concerns, and in Connecticut.
But I'm just thinking of a larger picture of the president saying, well, like Roosevelt did, that this is an essential part of our democracy, and sort of reiterating the purpose and maybe putting some kind of
There are, Christina.
stimulus or something. You're not what you know what I'm saying.
And Christina, there are some programs on the federal level that help us greatly. The Institute for Museum and Libraries, which is a federally funded organization, is a granting institution that gives not necessarily individual libraries, although they do some of that, but they give libraries nationally an opportunity to get funds for special projects and to try to grow some of these projects in positive ways to help libraries all over. And of course the federal government does fund the Library of Congress, and the Library of Congress is a great resource for all of us to where books are maintained, and they fund the Copyright Office, and that's another way for the logical protection of books and protection of authors so that they can produce more. I mean, there are some other residual things that the government does, but as Kathy has said, we are primarily, as with education, a locally funded, and I will tell you that there are public libraries in some countries and other countries whereby their model was national support for the public library as opposed to local support, and those libraries have run into difficulty because when the federal government or the national government decides they've got to cut back, and then the local, and there's no culture for the local to pick up the cost. In our case, we have that culture, and there are many libraries that are in localities that have done extremely well getting their budget sufficiently passed so that they can do more with the funding that they get, and they can serve
as far
more
as people who are passionate about the purpose of libraries and that they want them to be around, open and vital, how can people voice it in the most effective way? I'm saying, I guess.
Well, I think
Twitter,
Twitter, no. I think communicating with our elected representatives is key. And I know that we have heard, and it has been reported, reasons that
it wouldn't be like the governor then, or not.
I think it's important for the state government to know, but I think it is. The funding setup is very local, with 100 and however many, 60 or 70 towns in Connecticut. Each town has its own library, and it's funded locally by that town. And so, it is really our people on the street who are our elected representatives who are the ones who need to know. The budget problems that we're facing right now are very local, and we're working as hard as we can to try and find ways to correct our current really serious problem of a cut of over $1 million from our budget proposal, which
Wow.
will result in horrible restrictions on our
What
hours
are
and
the
staff. and
kind
so-
of restrictions that you might be looking at so people could know that?
Well,
I mean, I know nothing's written in
nothing
stone and
is
it's
written
not
in
going to happen, we
stone,
hope,
and we are doing our level best to figure out some way for that not to be the case. But essentially, we're looking at cutting back dramatically in the hours in the libraries. I mean, and we've looked at 4 different scenarios to consider as ways we can meet the budget cutback that we've been given. One would essentially result in all the branches closing, and we know that that would be terrible for everybody. So I think we're tending toward finding an option that would keep them all open, but keeping them all open means on a very restricted basis, and cutting back the hours in the main library as well. So, I mean, we can't, the amount of money that has been cut from our budget is, we can't get it in a bake sale, let's say.
No,
And so that is, we really are facing some very serious problems in terms of how we're going to set things up when the new budget year begins.
It's not been, Christina, just this year. I mean, we've undergone a series of years whereby the pickings have been very lean with regard to the funding we've gotten. At one time, when you try to look at what a library is worth within a community, we were about 2.1% of the city's budget. Now, that's not very much when you consider it to begin with. We are going down now next year to 1.6% of the city's budget. That's a quarter, reduction just in the share of the budget alone. And the issue is that with more people needing us now, one would have thought that from a government side, you'd say, well, let's do more for our citizens to help them through this recession.
People that are unemployed need the library,
Exactly.
more, and people are cutting back on their spending, so they're getting movies out of the library and books and
Right.
And as Kathy had mentioned, she mentioned earlier the fact that people are wanting to know more about the technology, more about websites where they can go to find jobs, more about retraining themselves and retooling themselves. And if they really care about doing it, quite frankly, the library's in a place to come, because very few of them can go out and pay, or they can't take time for education, so that they'll just benefit from what we're able to give them, and hopefully, better their lives. And that's one of the great things about the library. It's used so much, but all that use is really voluntary. It's not, so we're in a school system. Somebody said, well, you got to go to school and you have to be in class for so many days or whatever it happens to be. Anybody that comes to the library comes because they want to come, because they want to improve themselves. And people wanting to improve themselves is at the very heart of a healthy community.
True, and it's a free space. Not only in that you can get things for free at the library, but it's a free space in that it's, completely free in thinking, and it's a place for the people. And I think in our whole world right now, strengthening the public institutions is critical for us to be a society that is a unified society, an American society. And we hope that everybody will get out and support this effort to sort of shore up the libraries. And I hope that none of these things that you're talking about really come to pass.
That's really great. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and to appreciate your local library, because it's something that is at the heart of our country's democracy.